Princess Lyra of the Stellar Empire stomped her foot, causing the royal court to fall silent. Her forearms trembled with rage, and her purple skin darkened with emotion. The golden crown on her head tilted slightly as she glared at her father, Emperor Dorn. "Father, I won't marry a human!" she shouted, her voice echoing in the grand hall of the palace. Emperor Dorn sighed deeply. His daughter had always been stubborn, but this was about more than just her wishes. This was about the future of their empire. "Lyra, please understand. The humans have proven to be the most powerful race in the known galaxy. Their military might is unmatched. Their technology advances faster than any other species," he explained patiently. "We need this alliance." Lyra crossed all four of her arms. "But they're so primitive. They only have 2 arms. And their skin is so plain. Some are brown, some are light, but none have our beautiful purple shade." She gestured to her own skin, which sparkled under the light of the 3 moons shining through the crystal dome above. The royal advisor, Trell, stepped forward. He was old for their species, his once bright purple skin now faded to a light lavender. "Your Highness, if I may speak freely?" Emperor Dorn nodded, hoping his trusted friend might succeed where he had failed. "Princess Lyra, just 50 years ago, humans were confined to their single planet, barely able to reach their own moon. Now they have colonies on 27 different worlds. They defeated the Draconian Empire, who had ruled over hundreds of planets for 10,000 years. Trell explained, his voice soft but firm. The humans did this not through superior strength or numbers, but through their remarkable adaptability and determination. Some say it's because their planet was so dangerous, filled with natural disasters, changing climates, and countless predators that they evolved to overcome any challenge. Trell continued. Lyra scoffed. If they're so great, why do they need an alliance with us? They don't, Emperor Dorn admitted. We need them. The Void Walkers are expanding into our territory. Our scouts report they have destroyed 3 of our outer colonies already. The court fell silent. The Void Walkers were feared throughout the galaxy, a race of shadow beings who consumed all life in their path. No empire had ever successfully fought them off. And you think humans can stop them? Lyra asked, her voice now uncertain. They already have, Trell said. The human colony of New Terra was attacked 6 months ago. According to our intelligence, they not only repelled the Void Walkers but actually pushed them back and reclaimed 2 systems the Shadows had already consumed. Lyra's eyes widened. That's impossible. How? We don't know, her father admitted. Which is precisely why we need this alliance. The human ambassador arrives tomorrow. His name is Captain James Walker of the United Earth Forces. He has been chosen as your potential mate. Lyra stomped all 4 of her feet this time. I won't do it. I won't marry some ugly, 2-armed alien who probably can't even appreciate proper music or art. With that, she turned and stormed out of the court, her royal guards hurrying to keep up with her. Emperor Dorn watched her go, then turned to Trell. She'll come around, won't she? Trell looked uncertain. I hope so, Your Majesty. For all our sakes. Later that night, Princess Lyra sat in her royal chambers, staring out at the 3 moons of her homeworld, Celestia. Her personal servant, Mira, was brushing her long, silver hair. Can you believe it, Mira? Father wants me to marry a human, Lyra complained. Mira, who had served the princess since they were both children, smiled slightly. I've heard humans are quite interesting, actually. My cousin works at the spaceport, and says they're very clever. Clever or not, they're ugly, Lyra insisted. And I bet they smell strange too. Perhaps, Mira said gently. You should meet this Captain Walker before you decide? Lyra was about to respond when an alarm blared throughout the palace. The sound was one she had never heard before, a high-pitched wail that made her skin crawl. Her royal communicator buzzed, and her father's voice came through, urgent and afraid. Lyra, get to the safe room immediately. The Void Walkers have broken through our defenses. They're here. Lyra froze in terror. The Void Walkers had reached Celestia? But that was impossible. Their homeworld was supposed to be the safest place in the Empire. Mira grabbed the princess's arm. Your Highness, we must go now. As they ran toward the safe room, Lyra saw something through the palace windows that made her blood run cold. The beautiful night sky of Celestia was being consumed by darkness, not the natural darkness of night, but a living, moving shadow that seemed to devour the very stars themselves. The Void Walkers had come. And no one, not even her father's mighty armies, seemed able to stop them. The royal safe room was crowded with nobles and officials when Lyra and Mira arrived. Emperor Dorn rushed to his daughter, embracing her with all four of his arms. Thank the stars you're safe, he whispered. His usually perfect royal attire was disheveled, and his face showed deep worry lines. Father, what's happening? Lyra asked, her voice shaking. How did the Void Walkers get past our defenses? Before Emperor Dorn could answer, the massive screens on the wall of the safe room lit up. They showed live footage from outside the palace, shadows moving like liquid across the beautiful crystal buildings of the capital city. Where they touched, the structures turned black and began to crumble. Our shield technology failed, Trell explained, his old voice cracking with fear. The Void Walkers have developed some new ability to disrupt our energy fields. Our weapons are useless against them. A military officer approached and bowed quickly. Your Majesty, we've lost contact with the eastern and northern districts. The Void Walkers are consuming everything in their path. Lyra felt her heart's pounding in her chest. Their empire had stood for 12,000 years. Could it really fall in a single night? What about evacuation ships? She asked. Her father's face fell. The spaceport was one of the first places they attacked. No ships can get in or out. The room fell into a heavy silence, broken only by the soft sobbing of some of the nobles. They were trapped. The Void Walkers would consume the entire planet, and there was nothing they could do. Suddenly, a new alarm sounded different from the invasion warning. Unidentified ship entering atmosphere, called out one of the military officers. It's moving incredibly fast. All eyes turned to the screens, which now showed a sleek silver vessel cutting through the darkness of space toward Celestia. It was unlike any ship Lyra had ever seen, smaller than their battlecruisers but somehow more elegant, with lines that suggested both speed and power. It's a human ship, Trell said in surprise. That's a United Earth Forces design. Emperor Dorn stepped forward, hope flickering in his eyes. Captain Walker. He was due to arrive tomorrow for the marriage negotiations. He must have received our distress signal. Lyra watched as the human ship dove straight toward the darkness consuming their world. It seemed like madness, one small vessel against the endless shadows of the Void Walkers. What can one ship possibly do? She whispered. The answer came moments later. The human vessel opened fire, but not with standard energy weapons. Instead, it released bursts of brilliant white light that cut through the shadows like knives. Where the light touched, the Void Walkers recoiled and dissipated. What is that weapon? Emperor Dorn asked in amazement. Trell adjusted his viewing lens. It appears to be pure light, but somehow focused and intensified. I've never seen anything like it. The human ship continued its attack, carving paths through the darkness. Then, it landed in the plaza just outside the royal palace. The cameras zoomed in as a single figure emerged from the ship. Even through the screen, Lyra could tell it was a human. He wore a silver and blue uniform that clung to his two-armed body. His skin was a light brown color, and he had dark hair cut short. He carried some kind of weapon that glowed with the same white light his ship had fired. Captain Walker, Emperor Dorn said. He came alone? The human looked directly at one of the cameras. This is Captain James Walker of the UEF Starlight. I'm here to help. Your Majesty, if you can hear me, please direct me to the Void Walker's focal point. Every shadow swarm has a center, find it, and we can stop the whole invasion. The military officers looked at each other in confusion. Focal point? We didn't know they had one. The human knows how they work, Trell said thoughtfully. Perhaps this is how they defeated them at New Terra. Emperor Dorn grabbed a communicator. Captain Walker, we believe the invasion started at the main power generator in the center of the city. Could that be what you're looking for? The human nodded. Very likely. They're drawn to energy sources. I'll head there now. Lyra watched in disbelief as the lone human began running toward the heart of the darkness, his light weapon cutting a path before him. The shadows seemed to fear him, recoiling from his approach. He'll be killed, she said quietly. Mira touched her arm. Maybe not. Look how the shadows retreat from him. For an hour, they watched the screens as Captain Walker fought his way through the city. The Void Walkers tried to surround him several times, but his light weapon and some kind of personal shield kept them at bay. Finally, he reached the main power generator, now a swirling vortex of darkness. Without hesitation, he adjusted his weapon and fired directly into the center of the vortex. A blinding flash of light filled all the screens. When it faded, the shadows were retreating, seemingly burning away like morning mist under the sun. He did it, Emperor Dorn whispered in awe. One human did what our entire military couldn't. Lyra stared at the screen, watching as Captain Walker stood victorious amid the receding darkness. Despite herself, she felt something unexpected, a flicker of admiration. Perhaps humans weren't quite as primitive as she had thought. The palace buzzed with activity as emergency teams worked to repair the damage caused by the Void Walkers. Though the shadows had retreated, they had left destruction in their wake. Crystal towers were cracked, beautiful gardens were withered, and many had been injured in the attack. Princess Lyra stood in the grand meeting hall beside her father as they awaited the arrival of their unexpected savior. She had changed into her formal royal attire, a flowing silver dress that complemented her purple skin, but had refused the ceremonial crown. This was not a celebration, she had insisted. It was merely a meeting. Remember your manners, Emperor Dorn whispered to his daughter. This human just saved our entire world. Lyra nodded stiffly. I will be polite, father. Nothing more. The large doors swung open, and Captain James Walker entered. Up close, he looked even more alien to Lyra. His two arms hung at his sides, and he walked with a confident stride. His uniform was now slightly torn and dirty from the battle, but he had a dignified presence that surprised her. Your Majesties, he said, bowing deeply. Captain James Walker of the United Earth Forces. I apologize for arriving ahead of schedule and under such circumstances. Emperor Dorn stepped forward and, breaking all protocol, embraced the human with all four of his arms. No apology needed, Captain. You saved our world. The Stellar Empire is forever in your debt. When the Emperor released him, Captain Walker smiled. It was a strange expression to Lyra. Showing teeth like that would be considered threatening in her culture, but on the human's face, it seemed warm. I was simply doing my duty, Your Majesty, he said. When we detected Void Walker activity in this sector, I pushed my engines to the limit to get here. Trell, who had been studying a data pad, looked up with curiosity. Captain, how did you know about the focal point? Our scientists have been studying the Void Walkers for centuries, yet we never discovered this weakness. The human's face grew serious. We learned it the hard way on Earth's colony worlds. The Void Walkers attacked 3 of our outer settlements before we understood what we were dealing with. We lost millions before we discovered that concentrated photonic energy could harm them. But how did you know about the focal point? Lyra asked, speaking to the human directly for the first time. Captain Walker turned to her, and she was struck by his eyes. They were a deep blue, like the waters of the sacred lakes on Celestia's moon. We discovered it by accident, he explained. During an attack on New Terra, one of our scientists noticed a pattern in their movement like water circling a drain. They always converged around powerful energy sources. We theorized that they needed a central point to maintain their connection to, wherever they come from. Another dimension, Trell suggested. The human nodded. That's our best guess. By targeting that focal point with concentrated light, we can disrupt the connection and force them to retreat. Emperor Dorn gestured for everyone to sit at the large crystal table. Captain Walker, you must share this knowledge with our military. If the Void Walkers return, they will return. The human interrupted, then quickly added, Forgive me, Your Majesty. But the Void Walkers never attack just once. They're persistent. Lyra studied the human as he spoke. Despite her prejudice, she had to admit he was intelligent and well-spoken. Not at all the primitive brute she had imagined. Captain, she said suddenly, you mentioned your colony worlds. How many planets do humans inhabit now? Walker seemed surprised by her interest. 42 at last count, Your Highness. We've been expanding rapidly since we developed faster than light travel. In just 50 years, Lyra remarked. That's impressive. A small smile crossed the human's face. We adapt quickly. It's what humans do best. The meeting continued, with Captain Walker sharing everything humans had learned about the Void Walkers. Lyra found herself listening intently, occasionally asking questions. The human answered each one thoughtfully, never showing any sign of impatience or superiority. When the meeting concluded, Emperor Dorn insisted that Captain Walker stay as an honored guest in the palace. You must rest and allow our medical team to treat any injuries you sustained in battle. The human bowed again. I would be honored, Your Majesty. As the meeting dispersed, Lyra found herself walking alongside Captain Walker in the crystal hallway. I feel I must thank you personally, she said formally. Had you not arrived when you did? No thanks needed, Princess, he replied. I'm just glad I got here in time. There was an awkward silence before Lyra spoke again. I must confess, Captain Walker. I had certain preconceptions about humans. I see now that some of them were unfounded. The human's blue eyes met hers, and that strange smile appeared again. We all have preconceptions about those who are different from us, Your Highness. The important thing is being willing to reconsider them. Lyra nodded, feeling strangely flustered. Indeed. Well, I shall see you at the evening meal, Captain. As she walked away, Lyra was troubled by an unexpected realization. She was actually looking forward to talking with the human again. And that was most definitely not part of her plan. 3 days had passed since the Void Walker attack. The capital city was slowly returning to normal, though signs of damage remained throughout. Captain Walker had spent these days working with the Stellar Empire's military, teaching them how to detect and fight the shadowy invaders. Princess Lyra found herself seeking out the human's company more often than she cared to admit. Today, she had joined him on a tour of the city's outer defenses, accompanied by a small group of royal guards. The light cannons should be placed in a circular pattern, Walker explained to the military engineers as they inspected a defensive wall. The Void Walkers can slip through even small gaps in the light coverage. Lyra watched him with growing curiosity. Captain, why do you think the Void Walkers are attacking so many worlds? What do they want? Walker turned to her, his expression serious. That's the question that keeps me up at night, Princess. They don't communicate, they don't negotiate, they just consume. Some of our scientists believe they feed on energy, both technological and biological. You mean they eat life itself? Lyra said quietly. The human nodded. In a way, yes. But there's something else driving them. They're expanding too rapidly, too aggressively. It's almost like... Like what? Lyra prompted when he fell silent. Like they're running from something. Walker finished, his blue eyes distant. Something that scares even them. The idea sent a chill through Lyra's forearms. What could possibly frighten creatures as terrifying as the Void Walkers? Their tour continued through the afternoon, and Lyra found herself admiring the human's knowledge and dedication. He spoke to everyone, from high-ranking officials to common workers, with the same respect and attention. As they were returning to the palace, Lyra noticed something strange shimmer in the air near one of the damaged buildings. It reminded her of the distortion effect just before the Void Walkers had appeared. Captain, she said, pointing with one of her upper arms. Look there. Walker followed her gesture, his body immediately tensing. Everyone back! he shouted, pulling out his light weapon. But it was too late. A shadow burst from the shimmer, moving too fast to track. It flew straight at Lyra, a tendril of darkness reaching for her throat. Lyra froze in terror, unable to move or scream. In that moment, she was certain she would die. Then Walker was there, throwing himself between her and the shadow. His light weapon fired, cutting through the darkness, but not before a shadowy tendril slashed across his chest. The human gasped in pain but kept firing until the shadow creature dissolved into nothing. "Captain?" Lyra caught him as he stumbled, surprised by how light his two-armed body felt. Walker grimaced, pressing a hand to his chest where blood seeped through his uniform. "I'm fine, Princess. Just a scratch." "It's not a scratch," she insisted, helping him sit down as her guards formed a protective circle around them. "You need medical attention immediately." The human managed a weak smile. "Worried about me, Princess? I thought you didn't like humans." Despite the situation, Lyra felt her face flush a deeper purple. "I don't want you dying after saving my life, that's all. It would be diplomatically awkward." Walker's laugh turned into a cough. "We can't have that." The royal guards called for an emergency medical transport, and within minutes, they were rushing back to the palace. Lyra insisted on staying with Walker as the medical team worked on his wound. "The shadow's touch is poisonous," the head doctor explained, looking troubled. "It's spreading through his system." "But you can treat it, right?" Lyra asked, trying to keep the worry from her voice. The doctor hesitated. "Our medicines are designed for our physiology, not human. We don't know how his body will react." Walker, though pale and sweating, spoke up from the medical bed. "Contact my ship. The medical bay has antitoxins specifically designed for Void Walker poisoning." Lyra immediately ordered a guard to retrieve the medicine from the human's ship. As they waited, she sat beside Walker's bed, watching his condition worsen. "Why did you do that?" she asked softly. "Put yourself in danger for me?" The human's blue eyes, now clouded with pain, met hers. "Besides the obvious diplomatic benefits of keeping the princess alive?" "Yes, besides that," she insisted. Walker was quiet for a moment. "Where I come from, we have a saying. The measure of a person isn't how they treat equals, but how they protect those who need protection. In that moment, you needed protection. Even though I've been less than welcoming?" A small smile crossed his face. "First impressions aren't always accurate, Princess. I think we're both learning that." Before Lyra could respond, the guard returned with the medicine from Walker's ship. The doctors administered it immediately, though they warned it might take time to work. As Lyra reluctantly left Walker to rest, she was stopped by Trell in the hallway. "The human did something remarkable today," the old advisor said thoughtfully. "He saved my life." Lyra acknowledged. "More than that," Trell replied. "He showed you what humans value. It wasn't duty or politics that made him step between you and death, it was something else entirely." Lyra thought about this as she walked away. Perhaps there was more to humans, more to this human in particular, than she had ever imagined. Captain Walker recovered slowly over the next few days. The human medicine had stopped the poison, but his wound was deep and needed time to heal. Princess Lyra visited him daily in the palace medical wing, bringing reports on the defense preparations and, though she wouldn't admit it aloud, enjoying his company. On the 5th day after the attack, she found him sitting up in bed, studying data on a handheld screen. "You should be resting," Lyra said, using her lower arms to place a basket of local fruits on his bedside table. Walker looked up with a smile. "I've never been good at sitting still, Princess. Besides, there's something odd about the Void Walker attacks that's been bothering me." Lyra sat in the chair beside his bed, now familiar enough with the human to feel comfortable in his presence. "What do you mean?" "Look at this," he said, showing her the screen. It displayed a map of the galaxy with red dots marking Void Walker attacks. "They're not spreading randomly. They're following a pattern, moving through specific sectors in sequence." Lyra studied the map, her eyes widening. "They're circling something." "Exactly." Walker nodded, looking impressed. But what? What's at the center of their movement? Using her upper right hand, Lyra zoomed in on the map. That's the Forbidden Zone. No ship that's entered has ever returned. Walker's expression grew serious. In human history, we've learned that forbidden zones usually contain something someone wants to hide. Before Lyra could respond, Emperor Dorn entered the medical room. He looked tired, the stress of recent events visible in his posture. Captain Walker, I'm pleased to see you recovering. I've come to discuss an urgent matter. Walker straightened respectfully. Of course, Your Majesty. Our long-range sensors have detected a massive Void Walker swarm heading toward Celestia. The Emperor said gravely. Larger than any we've encountered before. They'll arrive in 3 days. Lyra felt her heart sink. Can our new defenses stop them? Her father shook his head. Not a swarm this size. I've ordered full planetary evacuation, but even with all available ships, we can only transport about 60% of our population. The room fell silent as the weight of his words settled. Walker's face hardened with determination. There may be another way, Your Majesty. If what we've discovered about their movement pattern is correct, the Void Walkers are circling something in the Forbidden Zone. Whatever it is, it might be key to stopping them permanently. The Forbidden Zone? Emperor Dorn looked alarmed. That's suicide. Even if you could reach it. My ship has advanced stealth technology, Walker said. And I've survived Void Walker encounters before. Lyra stared at him. You can't seriously be suggesting. Someone needs to find out what they're protecting, Walker insisted. This isn't just about Celestia anymore. The Void Walkers are expanding throughout the galaxy. If we don't stop them, every world will fall eventually. Emperor Dorn stroked his facial tentacles thoughtfully. Even if I approve such a mission, your injuries will heal, Walker said firmly. I've survived worse. Lyra found herself speaking before she could think. I'll go with him. Both men turned to stare at her in shock. Absolutely not, her father said immediately. I know more about the Forbidden Zone than any human could, Lyra argued. Our archives contain ancient maps and warnings. Captain Walker needs that knowledge. It's too dangerous, Emperor Dorn insisted. More dangerous than staying here when the Void Walker swarm arrives? She countered. Besides, Captain Walker saved my life. I owe him this. Walker studied her with new respect. Princess, your father's right. This mission would be extremely risky. Are humans the only ones allowed to be brave? Lyra challenged him. A tense silence filled the room. Finally, Emperor Dorn sighed heavily. The decision is ultimately yours, Lyra. You are a royal of the Stellar Empire, and as such, you have the right to choose your path. He turned to Walker. But you will swear to protect her with your life, Captain. Walker nodded solemnly. I already have, Your Majesty. Later, as preparations began for their dangerous mission, Lyra found Walker on the observation deck of the palace, gazing up at the stars. Why did you agree to let me come? She asked. You could have sided with my father. Walker kept his eyes on the stars. Because you were right. This affects all of us, not just humans. And because I've learned something important about your people in my time here. What's that? He turned to her with that warm smile that no longer seemed so alien. That courage isn't unique to humans. You proved that when you volunteered. Lyra felt a strange warmth spread through her. My father still expects us to marry, you know. If we survive this. Walker's eyebrows raised slightly. And how do you feel about that now? Lyra looked away, her purple skin darkening with emotion. I'm less opposed than I was. But don't let that go to your head, human. Walker's laugh was genuine. Wouldn't dream of it, Princess. As they stood side by side, watching the stars where their dangerous journey would take them, Lyra realized something had fundamentally changed. She no longer saw Captain James Walker as just a human, an alien to be tolerated. She saw him as a person brave, intelligent, and worthy of respect. And perhaps something more. Captain Walker's ship, the UEF Starlight slipped silently through the darkness of space. Its advanced stealth systems kept them hidden from the swarms of void walkers they occasionally passed. Princess Lyra sat in the co-pilot's seat, her 4 hands busy with the ship's sensors and navigation systems. She had proven to be a quick learner of human technology. "We're approaching the border of the Forbidden Zone," Walker said, his voice tense. "Last chance to turn back." Lyra gave him a determined look. "We don't have a choice. The evacuation ships won't be able to save everyone on Celestia." Walker nodded, guiding the ship forward. "Stay alert. According to these readings, Void Walker activity increases dramatically ahead." As they crossed the invisible boundary into the Forbidden Zone, the ship's sensors began to detect strange energy patterns. The darkness outside seemed to deepen, as if the very starlight was being consumed. "The ancient texts called this region the Devourer of Light," Lyra said quietly. "They warn that it contains a hunger that can never be satisfied." Walker checked his instruments. "We're picking up something at the center of the zone. It's massive, whatever it is." They pushed forward, navigating through swirling clouds of shadow. Twice they had to power down completely to avoid detection by passing Void Walker patrols. During these silent drifts, Lyra found herself acutely aware of the human beside her, his steady breathing, his unwavering focus, his strange but no longer unsettling 2-armed form. Finally, they reached the heart of the Forbidden Zone. What they saw there made them both stare in disbelief. "That's impossible," Lyra whispered. At the center of the zone floated an enormous construct, a sphere of twisted metal and crystal that pulsed with dark energy. Around it, thousands of void walkers swirled in a protective dance. "It's artificial," Walker said, his voice filled with wonder. "Someone built this." Lyra checked the ship's sensors. "The energy readings are off the scale. It's like it's pulling in everything around it." Walker's face suddenly lit with realization. "It's a prison." "A prison? For what?" "For them," he said, pointing to the Voidwalkers. "Or rather, for what creates them. Look at the pattern. They're not protecting it, they're being drawn to it. That construct is generating the Voidwalkers." Lyra studied the readings again. "You're right. The energy flows outward from the construct, forming the shadows. But why would anyone build such a thing?" Walker shook his head. "I don't know. But if we destroy it, we destroy the source of all Void Walkers," Lyra finished. They looked at each other, the weight of the discovery heavy between them. "The Starlight wasn't designed for this kind of firepower," Walker said. "But I could modify the light cannons to overload. If we get close enough, it would be a one-way trip." Lyra realized. The explosion would catch us too. Walker nodded solemnly. "I'll do it. You can take the escape pod back to Celestia." "No," Lyra said firmly, placing one of her hands on his arm. "We came together, we finished this together." For a long moment, they stared at each other. Then Walker reached out and touched her face gently. "When I was sent to marry a princess from the Stellar Empire, this wasn't exactly what I had in mind," he said with a small smile. Lyra laughed softly. "When my father told me I had to marry a human, either did I." Together, they prepared the ship for its final mission. Walker modified the light cannons while Lyra calculated the perfect approach vector. They would have one chance. They needed to get close enough for the explosion to destroy the construct before the Void Walkers could stop them. "Ready?" Walker asked as they strapped into their seats. Lyra took a deep breath. "Ready." The Starlight shot forward, its engines pushed beyond their limits. The Void Walkers sensed them immediately, rushing toward the ship in a wave of darkness. Walker activated the light shields, carving a path through the shadows. "We're almost there," Lyra called over the roar of the engines and the wailing of warning alarms. The construct grew larger in their view screen, its dark energy reaching out like tentacles. The ship shuddered as Void Walkers began to break through the light shields. "Now!" Walker shouted, pressing the overload sequence. The light cannons began to glow, building to an impossible brightness. Shadow tendrils broke through the hull, reaching for them. Walker grabbed Lyra's hand as darkness began to fill the cockpit. "I'm glad I met you, Princess Lyra," he said, his blue eyes meeting her gaze. "And I you, Captain James Walker," she replied. The light cannons reached critical mass, and for a moment, everything went white. 1 month later, Emperor Dorn stood on the balcony of the royal palace, looking up at the night sky. The stars shone with a clarity not seen in generations. The Void Walkers were gone not just from Celestia, but from the entire galaxy. Reports had come in from every sector confirming their sudden disappearance. Trell joined him, his old face creased with both joy and sorrow. "The memorial service is prepared, Your Majesty. The entire planet wishes to honor their sacrifice." Emperor Dorn nodded, his eyes still on the stars. "They saved us all. Human and Celestian together. They proved something important," Trell said softly. "That differences mean nothing when hearts align." From that day forward, the Stellar Empire and Earth formed an alliance stronger than any political marriage could have created. And in the royal garden, 2 statues stood side by side, a 4-armed princess and a 2-armed human captain, their hands joined, their faces turned toward the stars they had saved. Sometimes, on quiet nights, visitors to the garden claimed they could hear laughter. A princess who once declared she would never marry a human, and the human who changed her mind.